find out what's going to happen next. Thank you. Kevin has just started recording the meeting. Welcome to this inaugural meeting of the Language Subcommittee of the Sexual Misconduct Survey Council. Yeah, and as Kevin has pointed out, our goals today are to select a chair and then start discussing how to do the work. I'm going to step back because Martina and Katie, I know you're both perfectly capable of doing that. But I'm here if you need me.
Well, I guess I would, my first question is there anything that says that we have to have a chair for this committee? Is in our, I mean, it's a 3-person committee. And then Martina and I are both co-chairs for the council. So I feel like it's a little, I don't know what.
I think we said in our instructions to the whole group that every committee should have a chair or at least like a point person. But like you said, like there's 3 of us. I kind of just feel like either we volunteer Jenna because we're already co-chairing and she's not here, so that's like maybe a little unfair of me, or we just know that there's 3 of us, and so it's going to be a little bit of a different story for our committee than other committees.
Or we could say you and I are co-chairs of this committee, and then whoever's at, you know what I mean? And then like we can present, either one of us can present to when we have an opportunity at the larger meetings, just depending on attendance and all that. Like because for example, I won't be there next week at the meeting. You could present about this meeting, and then if you're gone, I can present.
Yeah. So let's say for now then that, we're co-chairs. And then if the next time we check in with Jenna, if she's like, no, I could totally do it, we'll be like, cool, 3 co-chairs, or she can just do the chair, or like whatever. I think given how small it is, I feel like we can be a little bit more casual than like the big question group, which has like, 25 people or whatever exaggerated number I'm making up in my head.
That makes sense to have a chair for that one for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay. And so then the other thing that we said to everyone else was that what we should do in these meetings is like decide on a schedule and calendar those meetings if possible. I think that because we're doing language stuff, we probably are going to be kind of like, and correct me if you think I'm wrong on this, everyone, I kind of sense that we're going to be kind of bookending things. Like maybe we should meet and come up with some like best practices and some tools and things like that. And then probably we'll be waiting until the questions are produced, and then we'll be reviewing those questions. Is that, do y'all think I'm on the right page there?
I think so. I don't know. I'm happy to hear feedback, Rowan, on that as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I think there's some stuff in the research about what kind of language to use. We know that we ask about behavioral things. We don't say, have you been raped? Those sort of things. So I think, setting out some guidelines for them as they're starting to do their work. I think also maybe suggesting some, maybe working with the or the outreach folks to talk about how they're going to present the project when they're talking to folks at the institutions or whoever they're doing it. What kind of language do you want them to use? What do you want them to call things? Just framing, I think the language subcommittee can help with that a lot. And the fact that you are both on it is amazing. I'm really happy. And then I think, reviewing the questions or reviewing the guidelines to make sure that they're trauma informed. Something else to think about is thinking about how to talk about privacy. And I think most folks are probably going to be really clear on that, but why is privacy so important? Why is anonymity of data so important? So that folks are thinking about writing questions in a way that is not going to be self-identifying. How do we ask a question and ask for some context around an incident, maybe without having them give us so much description that it would be possible to find them?
Yeah. Based on the notes, based on what you're saying and what we've talked about in other meetings, the notes I have right now for like kind of what our maybe charge would be then is guidelines document or something like that for everyone else that includes like we probably should pick a reading level tool and like a goal reading level range. What you were just saying about privacy and anonymity of data, so explaining why that's important, explaining how we're going to talk to the public about that, and then also how we need to know how to not collect identifiable data in the structure of the question. We talked about safe exit language, like what language do we want to have for the safe exit button, and like where do we want that to go and what do we want that to look like. And then maybe just like a general primer on trauma-informed language, like you said, like behaviors rather than defined concepts, et cetera. Do we have anything else that comes to anyone's mind? Okay.
Maybe in general, just trying to find some ways to talk about, for example, not using the word perpetrator, right? But the person who is accused, right? So thinking about those kinds of things, use this, not that kind of language, maybe might be helpful to almost like a glossary kind of. This is how we're defining the terms. These are the words that we're using, and this is why we're not using these words.
I like that.
One of the things that I took away from the meeting we had last week was from the New Hampshire presentation. It was like the victims, they didn't like there was victim blaming and stigma from questions about alcohol and incapacitation. And so they said 2022-23 regroup and revise. They revised the questions. And so I haven't looked through this implementation guide that they have. Is this something that we can like don't have to reinvent the wheel and can adopt from one of these other states to like, because again, I think that might be useful from their work, you know, for efficiency's sake. If that exists, Rowan, is that something you could collect for us and sort of codify into an area? Martina and I can look at it and then maybe have something easily reproducible for the larger committee with council.
Yeah, I would love to even have some like, here's an example of version A and then how it was revised positively for version B, just to show that change. I think that'd be really cool.
If I remember right, there's like 2 or 3 states that had implementation guides that were just posted on the website available to cobble from.
On Basecamp.
I'm not sure they're on Basecamp. I'll track them down though and see and collect them.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And then for this, you know, we could take that from the language for the language piece, you know, and use that as our kind of model going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We also at SAS, we have a fair bit of language that we use in our public facing stuff, like for our survivor information packet that we give to folks in the hospital, that we've worked on a lot over the years to like try to explain the difference between criminal and civil law at a 5th grade reading level. It is hard. So yeah, that's the face, Katie. So we have some of that. So I'm also happy to share any of those things that we think might end up being useful, either as examples or just like whatever, talking through the process. Because the other thing that we spent a lot of time working on, we've all taken like plain language training, which is like an accessibility language writing model. And one of the big things that we took away is stuff like slashes are really confusing to people who potentially don't have English as a primary language. So like this / that can actually be like a really confusing instruction. Or one of the really great pieces of information that we got from that training is like Spanish is on average about 1/3 longer than English, just in the sentence structures of the, you know, so like if you're planning something to be translated, which we assume this will be available in multiple languages, like thinking about length of sentences, stuff like that. So we can also maybe try to put together like a really brief sort of plain language accessibility overview.
Do you have something like that, Martina? Like, does SAS have like a?
We have the toolkit that the training center, that the organization that did the training for us produced, which I probably am not, I'm probably not allowed to share it because we paid them for it. But we can definitely put together like a little overview of some of those like sort of key salient points, and just a little document that should be fairly simple. I mean, a lot of it is more common sense that you would think. It's just that so many of us were trained to do a very particular kind of writing. I mean, like, I have a PhD in English. I was trained to do the stupidest writing you could possibly imagine with the most words that are the most confusing. So I've had to really like unlearn that. And so actually like a lot of the plain language recommendations were like pretty practical. So I think I should be able to throw together something pretty quickly from the resources that the plain language training institute used.
I can also check with Rudy Ann is our DEI person at HEC, and Katie, there might be some plain language tools in the Attorney General's office too that we could share with. I know, right? Yeah, there's this. I know. I worked in community settings, and I was like 5th to 9th grade. You know, 8th grade was kind of what you shot for, and then I went to Reed College, and it was like I had to like, yeah, completely rethink how I thought things. So yeah, but I think if we can find some of those tools that we can share, and there might even be a couple of online trainings that we could find through the state that we could suggest the survey writing folks take, that might be helpful as they're moving forward.
Yeah, the one that we did is so great. We've had all of our staff do it, and then unfortunately it costs money, so we can't obviously do that. But if only this council had some funding, we could do a big training. But I'm guessing that there are some resources that are free that are available, because it really, I do think, is a benefit if you're going to be writing those questions to have thought some of that through ahead of time, especially given that one of the big pieces I took away from last week's meeting was just that like the length of the surveys is going to be one of the biggest issues. And so like if we're going to be really working to like pare down questions and like pare down the number of questions and pare down the total language, like that becomes a challenge for writing and clarity.
Yeah, for sure. I think length and just, yeah, there was a lot of barriers identified in that they've had.
Ooh.
Yeah, DAS has a whole web page about it. So looks like a bunch of resources.
This is great. Wow. I'm not being facetious. I'm genuinely really excited about this because I can give this to staff now also. This is great for me. Awesome.
Yeah, there's a little one pager that's pretty great here. Use plain language to improve your writing.
Yeah, this is awesome. Yeah. Well, and one of the pieces here is about like visual stuff. And I think that the implementation subcommittee is probably going to want to think about visual presentation and like skip logic and all of those things. So that might be also something for them to consider, whether or not there's some accessibility resources related to just like visual presentation. I mean, there's like the basic stuff, like don't have it be left justified rather than center justified, like duh. But there's a bunch of other stuff that I don't know anything about because I'm not a visual designer, that they might want to think through.
I don't know much about accessibility tools. Not really been my subject matter expert of anything. So I don't know, Martina, if you guys work with one or if you have one that you use at SAS with your materials. I don't know, maybe that's something Jenna knows about, but I don't know if we want to look at various options for those. Is it just simply something you put, like you upload your document to a tool and it tells you what reading level that it is? Again, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a couple different reading level resources. So there's like the Flesh Kincaid and the, oh, they all have these like very silly names, but there's like 5 or 6 of them. There's one resource, I'm trying to find it right now. I have it bookmarked somewhere that we usually use. And it is, it kind of like collates all of them. And so basically you just like copy paste your language into it and it'll spit you out a sort of like, in this particular page, they give you like an average score based on like all of these different measures. So we could pick a measure, like we could say, we like Flesh Kincaid versus and we like everything else. Or we could say, given that they're all pros and cons in their own way, here's one that kind of gives us an average. And I'm trying to find it right now. Oh, there it is. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so this is the one that we use, readability formulas. And I like this one because you can select which of the popular formulas you like, or you can just do the sort of all of the above ones. And then you pop in your text and you, you know, and you process it basically, and it'll spit you out the sort of average. And it'll break it down like the Flesh reading ease, oh, Gunning Fog, that's Gunning Fog readability, Coleman Lau readability, and it'll sort of like walk you through all of them and then give you sort of your average. And I like this one because it also tells you not just what the grade level it is, but like what's the age range and what's the like reading difficulty. So like what does 9th grade mean? Slightly difficult is apparently what 9th grade means, right? Versus like very difficult would be like college level. So I think it's helpful.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Hi Kelly, I see your message here. We haven't had a visitor yet, I guess is the short answer. So I don't have any I'd be happy to have you, you know, chime in if you have questions or want to make comments about our discussion. This is our first subcommittee meeting on language. So we are kind of muddling through what our first steps are. So welcome.
Well, thank you. My goal is to be at as many or all of these as I can. I'm sorry I got here 15 minutes late. I'm very interested in this. I'm a sociologist who I've taught survey design classes here on campus. I'm now in charge of all of our survey and data management reporting work and all this kind of stuff. So there's a half a dozen different intersections of my interest in this. So I just, A, I wanted to introduce myself. Thank you for letting me do that. B, I want you to know I could be a resource. I don't want to impose. I don't want to presume you need my resources, but have a lot of experience both in training and development of this sort of thing. So yeah, thank you for allowing me to be here, and I'll stop there, but I sort of want to sort of get oriented to the discussion as you all go forward. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. And I don't know if you followed our main meetings or if this is the very, very first meeting that you popped into. We've broken into a couple subgroups.
Yeah.
So the biggest of the subgroups is actually going to be the one that's like writing the questions. Then we have one group that's specifically working on what are the implementation recommendations that'll be given to the different institutions, which could include stuff like the visual design or stuff like, which preferred survey tools they recommend or whatever. And then we're really thinking about just like we've been saying, like the language itself. So that's kind of the parameter here, but I'm sure that your participation in all of the groups would be welcome, honestly.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I did not, and I'll keep this short. I don't want to get you all sidetracked. I didn't realize that this committee had been formed until I think it was in June. Kevin, I think you and I have emailed actually about this, or maybe it was somebody else, but I remember seeing your email in some of those that I was exchanging with people. So no, I did not make it to the May meetings, but I am now on the list getting the announcements for it. So I will be trying to attend as many as I can. So thank you. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, no, I think it's great to have on-campus contacts with as many people we can too, since that will be a big task is the implementation piece. So has Willamette done its own sexual violence climate survey?
Climate survey, yes, we just finished the second one roughly a year ago. Second one meaning once we finally initiated them, we got them started right before COVID, and then that slowed us down, and we finally did a second round. But it doesn't involve sexual violence directly, unfortunately.
Okay.
And I've been here for almost 20 years, and I've been trying to work with different groups and resources on campus to sort of, just confront that broad issue directly and in a variety of ways. But we have not actually done any of this kind of systematic measurement of what people's experiences have been.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's good for us to know. And then also just any feedback you can give us on how the climate, or how the general climate surveys, when it will end, what was useful to those students, what was useful for getting feedback, what was not, those sorts of things. I think our group will be very interested in hearing from folks who've been doing at least that work to some extent, maybe not on the subject matter, but I think reaching college students has its own inherent challenges, just generally.
Yes, and that too is one of my interests in sort of following along. It's a gigantic challenge, and it's only getting worse. And students aren't reading the conventional forms of communication. They don't look at email very closely. They ignore. They get asked 10 times a day to give information on surveys. I mean, it is really, really challenging. There are strategies, of course, but I mean, it takes a lot of work. And I heard Martina mention resources. Well, that's one place where you need some in order to get higher returns from people. But
right.
Yeah. The college students I know and the high school students I know are pretty surveyed out also, I think, which is a big challenge we have. There's not only did they come from the era of No Child Left Behind style testing in schools for their entire primary education, but now they're taking 100 different surveys per year. I think they're pretty bored of it.
Plus, they're surveying one another on a moment-to-moment basis, right? Like, I don't know if any of you have kids at that age, but my kids are always dropping these Instagram surveys on their friends. I mean, it is a constant process that they're doing.
Well, and one of the folks from one of the other states who we heard from last week shared that, for someone who, there's skip logic, right? But for someone who answered yes and was going through the entire, if they were truly going through all of the questions in the survey, didn't she say that it was upwards of an hour of survey time? And that's just there's no way that's impossible.
I think she said 40 minutes. And I know I know that's just way too much. And if you've had experiences of sexual misconduct, you're the one who gets the longest survey, which is going to be the most triggering. One of the things I'm wondering about is if the language subcommittee would be interested in talking with talking a little bit more about the language with the folks at the other states as we get into this, and maybe if you have questions, because I'm happy to pull that information. This is what they changed in the survey, and this is what it looks like now. And I can always pull some of if we can see their surveys online, I think it might be helpful too to get an idea of what that looks like. But it might, if you want to meet with them and ask them specific questions, we can always try to set something up.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. And I didn't know, and I didn't ask in the meeting last week if they have specific language subcommittees. I assumed they did, or they had certain point people that worked on that. But yeah, I think that would be really helpful. Again, I'm certain, I wasn't involved in the passing of this legislation, but I'm certain we were modeling other states because it looks very similar to other states. And so I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel here in Oregon, since we already have borrowed this legislation from elsewhere. And so, yeah, I think that would be incredibly helpful. But I really, I do, that number really struck me, because I'm not going to spend 40 minutes on it. To be clear, anytime somebody asks me if I want to do a survey, I say no. So I just on anything. So I don't keep on the phone to do a survey. I don't do them ever. So if it's a 40-minute survey where I'm being asked about things I maybe don't want to discuss, yeah, I think a lens for how to keep, that's not really this committee's necessarily job, but I think should encourage brevity.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I'm
the best
thinking,
we can with following the statute. So
One thing
sorry.
I'm sorry, one thing that we hadn't really brought up was the idea of accessibility too, right? So, and I think that's a place where you're going to be maybe working more closely with the implementation folks on that piece of it. But I think we need to think about accessibility, not just in terms of tech, but the language that we're using, but then also thinking about neurodivergence, thinking about non-native English speakers, how and we can also take a look at how will this work for low vision, making sure that the survey is offered for folks who are low vision. I think there's just a lot of challenges in that as well.
And institutions have their whole own processes as well, like going through the accessibility departments. And I know a lot of institutions right now are really working hard to get into compliance with all of the accessibility laws around digital stuff. So like their websites and things, few websites are fully compliant. And I know you always working really hard on that. So I'm guessing that there are folks we can reach out to who have some guidelines. And then I'm also guessing that there's going to be a lot of variety across institutions. So it's going to be hard for us to potentially navigate or control for. And maybe the implementation team is going to have to come up with some like really strong guidelines. And then we're going to have to just see if they're followed. Rowan, remind me on Basecamp, you have that whole wonderful section where you had all of the survey questions by topic. So those, just so that I know I'm reading those correctly, those are pulled, so that's like the main topic of the question, then you pull different versions from different surveys, right? That are like trying to get at the same question. Okay. I think that's going to be really useful. And maybe, Katie, one of the things that we can do as a subcommittee is go through a couple of those and sort of use those as examples of like this, this committee or this state asked in this way, this state asked in this way. Here's what we noticed, pros and cons about those, to sort of give some guidelines so that the writing committee can actually like sort through what we think is like better and worse potentially.
Muted. I'm trying to find that document.
It's in the resources. It's the sample surveys part,
Yeah.
and then there's like survey questions by topic, complete surveys, sample surveys, et cetera. And the survey questions by topic was the section I was talking about because it has, just so many versions of the same question, which I think is really ideal for us.
Trying to see if I can. Sorry, I'm trying to create public links. I also want to let you know I have a house guest who may be walking behind me and kind of blurred out. So if you see someone, they're just
Not a
headed to the
ghost.
kitchen. Not a ghost.
I mean, no one is currently showing me their dogs, so I'm actually like pretty disappointed in all of you.
No dogs here, but you may see a toddler come in here in my house. We'll see.
Toddler dog.
We'll see.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, so as of right now, then, just to kind of like think back to our goal as a committee, we want to kind of make some guidelines documents, et cetera, for the main committee. We want to talk about privacy and anonymity of data, so making sure that the language of the questions doesn't elicit identifiable info, and also thinking about the way that we're explaining privacy and anonymity. We want to think about the safe exit language. We want to give a recommendation of a reading level tool. We want to maybe give an example of some just like basic trauma-informed language overview stuff and plain language accessibility stuff. And then like a bit of a glossary of like what terms are we going to suggest, perpetrator, victim, et cetera. And then maybe some of those examples of questions and how they've been changed or how they can be perceived, right? With that like victim blaming language perception. And then the only other thing I have on my list is that we're probably going to want to connect with the outreach folks and ask them, like, how are they presenting this project broadly? Or that's the implementation and outreach folks, and think a little bit about the language there. Am I missing anything from my like sort of workflow? Oh, and then we'll review the questions once they're written, but that's down the line.
I don't think so. I think that covers it.
Then what do we want to do if that's kind of our big goal? It seems to me that the biggest lift there is starting to create those guidelines documents. We could sort of split it up. I could make a doc on Basecamp that has that outline, and we can just start dropping things into there. What feels like the best way to move forward? We can, we can assign, like, I'll do the plain language, you do the glossary. Like, I don't know how I just don't know how we want to like move forward. And then when we want to meet next.
I could work on a glossary. I'm just trying to look here. I'm looking through these documents Rowan put. Do any of these include a glossary? See one.
Ooh, yeah, good question.
There's some definitions.
Yeah, I think the definitions, I think I think what's most important is that we select a definition for example, when we're talking about partner abuse, this is what we mean. It can be economic, it can be, blah, blah, blah. So that when you're asking a question, so that's what we're asking. This is what we mean by it. And now, have you ever had those experiences, right? So, so each survey uses its own definitions, but I think that we just kind of need to glean through those. I could go through, I'd be happy to take another pass through the surveys and pull out that kind of descriptive language. This is how they're describing that, and then put that together in a document if that'd be useful. Okay, I can do that.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
And then maybe we can also reach out to those other, the two very helpful folks from the other states and ask if they have any of the similar things. Like, did they create a glossary, either like an internal document or something that was public facing? Did they use any plain language accessibility or any trauma-informed principle guidelines? Like, just to see, again, as Katie said a few times, how we can not reinvent things if they've already done the work.
Well, and I think, Martina, like, for your skill set, probably what makes most sense to me just is you having this background is putting together the trauma-informed principles that are the overarching principles for our group. That seems to use all of your skill sets well. And then me being the lawyer can work on the definition section, maybe sort of.
Okay, so I can,
yeah,
so I can work on putting together some like basic trauma-informed principles for language, and then you can, and I can also try to put together some of that plain language stuff. I think that the stuff that we were looking at from the state of Oregon is like pretty useful. So maybe I can just pull whatever is best there.
I think so too. I mean, you look at it a little bit more closely when we're offline, but it seems pretty comprehensive, and it's already a resource that exists that we could sort of adopt. Like, this is the guidance from Oregon state government for plain language. This is what we intend to use in this survey as well. I don't know that we need to come up with our own internal document for that. If I think it looks pretty good. So
yeah.
But there isn't anything in at least that resource. There may be something online that exists, but around trauma-informed principles and then the definitions, those are a little bit more niche in terms of our roles here. So yeah, if you want to take sort of a stab at that, and then Rowan, if you can sort of compile what other definitions other states have done, and I can sort of look through those and see which ones. Well, I don't know. which ones we like the most. And Martina, I'll lean on you as well for that too. But or use that with in looking at that, use sort of the trauma informed lens. If we like how they sound, not.
Yeah. I think that's great. Okay. So it seems like that is a good next steps for us right now. And maybe when Kevin, are you planning to send out like a summary or minutes, or should one of us? I don't actually know for these subcommittee groups like what our plan was with that.
Yeah, I plan on taking minutes for these and posting them and stuff. So I'll get that out within a few days. Yeah.
Okay, cool, easy. So maybe we can have that as our next steps, and when we check in with Jenna next, we can see if she wants to jump in on any of that. But perhaps our sort of ultimate goal can just be having a set of documents on Basecamp that have our recommendations, and we can just start working towards that. So, and I'm looking at the time and knowing that we have about 15 minutes left. Do we want to, so A, do we have a scheduled meeting next month, or do we need to have a meeting next month? And then B, how do we want to report back to the main group on this?
As far as the scheduling, that it's entirely up to you guys, because I don't have anything scheduled out for you yet. I was gonna see what you guys wanted to do.
Yeah, if this day and time works well for you next month, then we could go ahead and do it as a recurring meeting. Just checking does meeting monthly feel okay? Do you feel like you need more? Do you need less?
I think at this point it's fine. I think maybe there may be cause for more once we're actually reviewing language and going through the questions. But I think at this stage, once a month is fine.
Yeah.
So would that be
the
10th. Tuesday, the 17th or the 10th? Is this the second Tuesday? I don't even know.
It's the second Tuesday, but it is the Tuesday before 2 Tuesdays before the main meeting. So I guess you want to do the second Tuesday, or you want to do the week before the
one thing you
full council?
could do is think about doing it the Tuesday before the co-chair meeting, right? The co-chair meetings are on Thursdays, so you could do it the Tuesday before, because we're moving the co-chair meetings, so they're always going to be a week before the. Is it Wednesday? Oh gosh, is it Wednesday? Sorry.
It's Wednesday.
Yeah, we
Wednesday,
have our Wednesdays of the week before, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it could be the Tuesday before the co-chairs meeting.
The day before, yeah.
Hmm.
I can do that. I could also do the second Tuesday, with the exception of I may have jury duty on the second Tuesday next month. I very much doubt I will get selected. I don't think anyone wants me on their jury. I don't think I get through one here ever. But who's to say? I could be sitting in that room. So that would be my only caveat for the second Tuesday of next month.
And just so you know, I just got an email from Jenna, who has also been out with COVID and is just starting to kind of come back to herself. So she's actually hoping, Martina, that you or I would be happy to could chat with her on what's going on. So I'm happy to do that. I'll go ahead and follow up with her.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. All right.
Do you have jury duty on the 10th, Martina?
Yeah, theoretically.
Theoretically. And is it with Lane County or is it Muni Court?
Lane County.
Okay.
Again, like there's no way I get into one here and they're like, yeah, put Martina on a jury. She's the director of the sexual assault organization and a socialist. Like they're not going to put me on a jury, but I might still have to show up for a little bit and say things
you
like,
will have
hello,
to show
I
up.
am a socialist.
Maybe. You may have to show up. You won't know until the day before.
Right, exactly. I love it.
Well, maybe for next month we could do the 17th then, if that's okay. I mean, that's the 3rd, I suppose. Let me see. A rough week for me.
I can do the 3rd, I can do the 17th. We can also tentatively do the 10th, and hopefully I'll be there. And if not, y'all can soldier forward without me. Whatever feels right.
Katie, why don't you go ahead and make the call on that?
All right, let's do the 17th then. I think the 3rd feels too soon. I'll be gone and for a week, and that's the first week of school, so there's a number of things that week for me. So
How old are your kids?
I have an 8-year-old, almost 3rd grader. I have a 1.5-year-old, and then I have a stepson who is going to his freshman year of college. So 3
Okay.
boys at home, almost 2. So wide range of ages and activities at this house.
Yeah, and yeah, because everything you're doing for each one of them is completely different than for the
Completely
others.
different.
So
Yeah.
yeah, you can't group
we'll
anything.
we'll be moving one into the dorms while the other one's, in his diapers. Insane. So, yep.
Is the older one going to UO? I feel like I've asked you this question before.
He's going to Oregon State. So,
well, cool. We can use
Yeah.
him as our captive audience and maybe pepper him with questions about how freshmen in college perceive these things.
Oh yeah,
True.
the kids of people in public service and nonprofits love that kind of thing. They're, it's just their favorite.
Yeah.
Why I don't have any. Okay, well,
So
it sounds like, oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. So just to be sure, like 9 o'clock then on the 17th? That 9 o'clock is still a good time. Okay.
That's great.
So then for our general meeting, which is on the 29th, what do we want? Do we want to just give a little overview of what we decided in here? Do you want to do it, Katie? Do you want me to do it? I have no thoughts or feelings either way.
Our general meeting is on the 22nd.
Just kidding,
Right?
the 22nd.
So I apologize. I'm going to be in Montana. So I will be gone again for that meeting. I don't usually go anywhere, and now I've been gone twice, but I'll be with my kids in Montana on the 22nd. So I'll lean on you to give our update.
Okay, cool. I will put it in my list. And we can also remind me of that in our co-chair planning meeting. Okay. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Kevin. All right. Is there anything else that we feel like we should talk through or go over or etc.?
I don't think so.
The only other thing I might suggest is that you might want to reach out to the when we find out who the co-chairs are in the other committees, or just to the other committees and say, hey, if you wanted to, this is what our plans are, and we're happy to meet with you. So just thinking about maybe offering that. You could probably do that on the 22nd. I think that would be fine.
Okay.
But yeah, but how you want to collaborate with them, what's going to be easiest.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. And it seems like based on how I've used Basecamp in the past, so far since we started this, we could probably also create our own little section, right, with documents that we put in it, like in the
I did that as we were speaking. It doesn't have any files in it right now, but now there's a little box when you go, you should be able to see it. If you go to the main Basecamp.
There it is.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for thinking what I came to 10 minutes after.
No, you were talking about that, and it's a little, yeah. And I'm not sure why it's the University of Portland Sexual Misconduct Survey Council all of a sudden, but I will try and adjust that, so.
I guess one more thing, sorry, that we didn't sort of get into our discussion, but might be useful for it's not really trauma informed, but in terms of recommendations about gender identity, language around gender identity for the committee, and any resources we have on that. Again, that's not necessarily my subject matter expertise, but just want to be cognizant of that as well. And that was definitely something that was, I think, brought up in the New Hampshire meeting, that they had to revise or think about that in a different way.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, that's on my list for sure. We kind of include that now at SAS in our just like general trauma informed and inclusive language principles.
Yeah,
particularly just given that people assume that this is a space for women, and so it is like one of the trauma informed principles that we have is like make sure people know that that's not true.
okay,
That's
perfect.
Yeah, that's one place too where I think it's really helpful to use student input, because that's it's always evolving for them, and so yeah, I always feel like I'm a year behind how they're thinking about gender and sexual orientation. Oh, the other thing to think. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, and we don't have a student on this subcommittee from our
Right.
council, which is a little bit of a bummer.
Yeah.
I also have some of my staff are like 22 and just graduated from college also, so I kind of require them to be my student experts sometimes. And I'm actually going to suggest that we do like as little gendered language as possible, because like you were saying, Roan, that stuff changes so fast, and it's so like in some ways even like regionally specific, that I think it's easier to have just sort of like fully gender neutral language, rather than trying to like define different categories, except for perhaps in the demographic section.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, just the only place we would need that really would be for the demographics, but for the demographics too, and then thinking about what's are there, and Kelly, maybe you know this, maybe there, or I can probably find it out because I work at HEC, but there may be standards that the state uses for comparative data for race, ethnicity descriptors and things like that. So if we can kind of stay with those, then that sort of makes our data a little bit more comparable to maybe other areas. So yeah, so I'll look into that too. But however you guys decide you want to do it is great.
The only thing that gets a little tricky with the gender identity piece is the definitions too, though, of various acts, and how do you define without using gender identity anything. So and I think maybe SAS maybe has some useful things around that. Martina, sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, oh, sorry. I was going to say, we mostly just use descriptions of like physical acts. So instead of like any identity-based anything, we would say like, we would use a term like penis or vagina instead of like man or woman, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
In the surveys that I developed, we used, has anyone ever, penetrated your body with a finger or another body part or an object? And that way, because that language can be so loaded, right? The word penis itself can just be so loaded for someone who's having some dysphoria. So, or has anyone ever used your body part to penetrate themselves is another way of asking. And of course, then we catch so many more men who have been sexually assaulted when we ask if bodies have ever been used to penetrate someone without consent. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much our MO.
Yeah. So they're.
It looks like on some of these resources from other states, they were not using that neutral of language. So I think
we can do better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can.
And maybe why they had such a low response rate. Although let's not get, braggy yet. We haven't done anything. So
make some recommendations about how we explain that stuff in advance. Like usually, like when I'm teaching my healthy sexuality stuff, I start with a disclaimer that's like, I want to explain why I'm using this language the way that I am. You don't have to use it this way. This doesn't have to match your identity. We've just found that this is the most broadly understandable language. And usually that helps a little bit so that people aren't like, well, why are you saying female reproductive system versus vagina? And I can be like, well, because the vagina is like one very tiny part, and there's a lot more going on. So I think that those kinds of like little framing pieces can also help just ease the way. So who knows if anyone will read these if the survey is 45 minutes.
Well, if we get it wrong, they will let us know. We could just, guarantee you that.
Well, and I guess the other interesting thing about this state, just sort of thinking also, is that this is going to be going statewide. And so you can polarize some parts of Oregon by using too gender neutral of language. So there's that lens also. But I mean, we can only do what we can do in terms of who we're serving and what our mission is. And I think our mission is to be trauma informed, and that may not go over well with different demographics and different pieces of parts of the state. I thought it was interesting how they said that the online students really hated the survey because they're like, I don't even, not even on campus. Why am I filling this out? And so
Yeah.
like, how do you, I wouldn't have even anticipated that or thought of that, but I thought that was an interesting thing they brought up.
Yeah,
I
me
think
too.
I think it's really important to have maybe to offer options to the colleges. Like I know I've heard from community colleges and from graduate students, you're asking about things that could have happened to freshmen, right? And that doesn't have anything to do with me. That's not my life at all. But one of the things we might recommend is that the survey folks write different, or work with the community colleges, right, to write the question in a way that makes sense, and let them use, this is a subset that we believe is most appropriate in these conditions or something. And some of the religious colleges may also have some feelings about it too. So.
Right. I mean, yeah, I mean, even just using like residence halls or whatever, like that's not something that's going to be part of a community college student's experience for the most part. Things like that. So
yeah, that kind of modularity will be good if we can do it.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds like we have marching orders.
Yes. All right, well, it sounds like I'll see you all tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Excellent. Okay.
Thank you for letting me crash and participate. I appreciate it. You'll see me again.
Absolutely. Okay,
yeah,
thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it.
Please come to our main meetings if you can too. We'll be happy to ask questions of your expertise at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah, I have dozens of thoughts just from this discussion, but I don't want to thank you. I appreciate it.